We've got Mighty Shot set up here on the table. Ryan and I have just played it. This is a new game that's coming to crowdfunding, or might be there as you're watching this, from a company called This Is a Game, and this is a game of tactics. It's a game of dexterity.
That's true.
And a game of card play, I would say, would maybe be the third element there.
Yeah, I would say very much a game of dexterity, and that's where the Mighty Shot might come into play, and we're going to talk about that. But before we talk about the dexterity and why that matters, we're going to talk about everything else that's coming in this game. So this is a multiplayer game. It's kind of designed for 1v1, but you can play other variations, teams, and things like that. And each player is going to grab their own asymmetric faction. And when I say that there's asymmetry in this game, it is a wild amount of asymmetry. What you're doing in the game stays the same, but you're going to get some crazy powers because every one of these factions is going to come with a hero. In our version, we have these nice miniatures. I know there's some acrylic standees available. There's like varying pledges. So like choose the one that fits you.
Yes.
But we like to use the miniatures for this video. And it's going to come with its own little board, its own little player board, its own deck of cards, and even its own little set of miniatures and potentially even other components.
Yeah, and you're going to be putting some of those components out on these home fields. Like Ryan said, each of us had a home field. They're going to be put together at the beginning of the game to create the overall play space out here. But some of the pieces, more often these tokens, which are effectively very similar if you've ever played Crokinole, something like a Crokinole disc, that's going to be used on this play mat. Because you're going to be flicking these when you're trying to make shots in the game.
Yeah, the game doesn't use dice at all. It just uses this as kind of the combat mechanic. And like I said, we'll get to the combat once we explain what's happening on this board. Because when you're looking at this, it does feel a little bit like maybe icon overload at first, because every single spot on this board is a different color. It has a kind of ring around it. It has some numbers on it, some token
various
indicators.
Icons.
And what these icons mean is are all printed on this handy dandy player aid. So it's not too much, but what it really boils down to is every minion that you have has a special power. And these powers are going to vary, again, based on your faction. And as these minions are moving out across this board, when they move to their own colored spots, so that's a big part of the game. You've got green guys, you've got green locations. If the green guy goes in the green location, it triggers that green guy's power, which, again, based on your faction, might be an immediate effect, an ongoing effect. It could have a variety of different things.
Yeah, these effects are kind of where the tactics come in. Not only are you trying to trigger those effects, because some of them might make it easier for you to attack. Some of them might make it more difficult for your opponent to attack you, things like that. Some of them may just inflict automatic damage at the beginning of your turn if there is a minion in that space. And that's where a lot of the tactics come into play. You're going to be manipulating this board through a lot of the card play and through just some of the basic actions that you can take on your turn. So let's talk about that. We talked about the tactics, the card play, and the dexterity, and those are the three biggest components. I think the card play and the tactics go hand in hand. Not only are you triggering a lot of things like we said on the home fields, but the cards themselves are going to allow you to do some unique and special things. Every faction is going to have their own deck. Mine's a little different than Ryan's in that I think I have a lot more offensive. Like, I have no defensive abilities. Ryan has an ability with one of his minions that he's able to put these tokens on my shot board, making it more difficult for me to take my shots. I can't do anything like that, but I have maybe some actions that allow me to react. He has some dodges, but I have some where I can kind of cancel his shot ability when he's on the offense.
Yeah, being able to understand this deck and know what's in here is very helpful. At the end of your turn, you are going to be able to discard cards you don't like, so you're always going to start your turn with 4. And playing these cards is one of the actions you can take. In fact, there are 2 actions that really work on this board, kind of like what we alluded to. You have these 3 action tiles in front of you. 2 of them are either to move a minion and play a card. And that's a decision you're going to have to make. So you're going to get to do that twice. So you can move 2 minions, play 2 cards, one or the other. Moving the minions, we already discussed, is important because it's going to give you those special abilities. And these cards might help you set up your shots, potentially. But you can do these things in any order. So you can use your ability to shoot and then maybe play a card. And some of these cards will let you shoot again.
Yeah.
They'll let you position your guys or your opponent's guys. They'll let you maybe set up for some good shots on the board. But using your special shot, your third action, is always going to trigger like your special ability. For example, mine was Cryo Strike, and I get to do that Cryo Strike once per turn if I activate that token, which really there's really no reason not to.
No, there isn't any reason not to if you can. There are some things you have to keep in mind. When you take shots, generally, you're going to have 3 ammo tokens, that at least our 2 factions did. If you shoot one and it fails, you remove it and exhaust it, flipping it over to its non-colored side, but then you get to go again. You can go as long as you have active ammo tokens, so there are some things that Ryan can do on his turn to basically maybe exhaust some of my ammo tokens. Or if I take shots and exhaust them all, I'm not going to be able to take another action via a card or maybe my hero's main action to shoot unless I'm able to unexhaust or refuel effectively these ammo tokens, which can be done with some of the cards. I did that many times where I used my ability. His charge effectively does something similar to Ryan's Cryo Strike, but a little bit differently. But then I had a card here that let me recharge a couple of my ammo tokens and then take another shot.
Yeah, and taking those shots is really like a big part of the game because you're using these shots to attack your opponent's minions. You're never attacking your opponent like their hero directly. The damage you're doing is by taking out their minion. So every time you take out a minion, you're going to be doing damage to them. Every minion has a stat, how much damage their controller takes when they die, in addition to like their special abilities and everything. So you need minions out. Your opponent is trying to destroy those minions. And there's this tug of war of controlling these spaces. And you can see that we've got a bunch of spaces that are on our side of the board, and then 3 shared spaces that kind of are built in the middle that you can hold. And if you hold those, you're doing like 5 or 4 damage to your opponent at the start of every turn. So just killing their minions is one way, but if you can control these spaces and avoid taking damage, then you're going to have a huge advantage in the game. And that brings us to another point that we wanted to make. When it comes to taking out these minions, this is 100% skill-based,
Yes.
I would say, as opposed to a lot of war games or even like tactical games where maybe you're rolling dice and you're playing cards to re-roll those dice. That's not happening here.
Yeah, so it is skill-based, and that's a double-edged sword. It's skill-based, so there's not really a lot of luck per se. But on the other hand, you better be good. You know, so you're going to want to train up. One of the things I would say, and I think we both agree with this, if you sit down to play this, you're going to want to take some time, especially with a new player. Let them flick some of these ammo tokens over and over and over at the beginning of the game so you can get a feel for it. We play some Crokinole here, and depending on the Crokinole board you play on, you want to test it out a little bit just to see how it feels and how hard you have to flick to get into the target. Because this target, even if there aren't things in the way, you're going to have to get into various levels of this target depending on where the minion's standing. So in that front line, like Ryan said, those minions can do a lot of damage at the beginning of their turn, but they are the easiest to hit. All you have to do is be within the white, black, or red circle. However,
white, black, red.
Back in the back here, these red spaces, you have to be able to flick. Let's see if I can do this. Not at all. You can flick, and as long as it's touching the red, you will have done what they call a difficult shot, and these spaces back here are those difficult positions. As soon as you do that, you're going to eliminate that minion, like Ryan said earlier, and do damage to the hero equal to that value on the minion.
Now, if you're not good at flicking, which I am not the best at dexterity games in general, I picked a faction, this guy Thorvald, his ability actually kind of recognizes that.
It was nice.
If I miss, I get to take a second shot from where, which I would have missed twice. I get to take a second shot from where it landed, which was incredibly helpful for me.
You had to exhaust all your other ammo tokens.
I did, but I could take 3 shots and miss 3 times. So getting it close and then being able to just like tap it in was wildly helpful for me. So I would definitely recommend this faction for brand new players. Whereas David's, to use his ability, he had to hit his shot and then hit it again with a Jaguar token to get a special Jaguar ability. So that might be a little bit more on the difficult side. And I would say knowing that and knowing who you're playing with, like if you're playing with your kids, like, you know, you might want to like give them some of the easier factions to use if you want it to be fair.
Yeah, and speaking of factions, there are 4 factions here. We use these 2, but we also have Lucky Lucy here. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one. Yamarani.
That's cool.
These are 4 of the factions. I think the campaign also has some additional add-ons that you can get that have additional factions. One thing that we didn't mention, which isn't a faction per se, but they are the Behemoths. This is kind of a cool effect. If you've ever played any of the video games that this game is inspired by, some of them will have events like this where this big creature comes out that's a little chaotic. In this one, as soon as the player reaches down to 7 health, they're going to draw one of these behemoth cards, and they control that behemoth. Now, controlling that is a little bit different than the rest of the game. Ryan said earlier that there's no dice. There aren't when it comes to your factions, but there are these behemoth dice because at the beginning of your turn, if you have a behemoth, you're going to roll it up, and one of three things is going to happen. It's going to be snoozing, which means it doesn't do anything. There's a heart, which means it's going to automatically do damage. And then there's movement, which allows the player controlling it to move at one space. And you can move into your enemy's home field, which you can't normally do with any of your minions. But if you move onto a space with one of their minions, it destroys that minion. So you're able to use the behemoth to kind of, it's a bit of a catch-up mechanic,
a little bit, for
bit
sure.
of a chaotic thing, and kind of wild because each of them have slightly different powers. Like this one, if I rolled snooze, I could roll again.
Yeah, and if you check out the campaign, it's going to show you in a little bit more detail what all the factions do. I'm sure, I guess I would hope maybe that there will be more factions maybe in the future. This game is one of those games where you could see it just being infinitely expandable if they wanted to, with the different behemoths, with all the different factions, all the different powers and things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things going on here. I'd say if you like, or you're familiar with games like Dice Throne, these head-to-head games where you have these characters with all these unique powers, with some card play involved, but you want to replace maybe the dice rolling with a skill-based mechanic and a dexterity-based one at that. If you're a fan of Crokinole, it might feel right at home for you, but I will say this. It's challenging even if you're familiar with Crokinole. I'm a big Crokinole fan, and I was not able to just skate by and defeat Ryan on this one. He had a better touch today, so it comes down to that skill.
And it comes down to practice too. Like with any new dexterity game, or especially flicking games, getting to know your mat, getting to know the weights, and like practice before your first game.
There you go. That is Mighty Shot from This Is a Game. If you have any questions at all about it, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.